Finally fall, every reader's favorite season. So today I'm going to go through and give you my autumn book recommendations. I have them split into a few categories and there's kind of a lot, so I'm going to try and just go through them quickly. First up is thrillers. I just feel like fall is the perfect time to read thrillers. And first we have The Only One Left. This is about a caretaker who gets assigned to care for this elderly woman who is thought to have murdered her entire family. Since then, she's been living in her cliffside mansion by the water, and she's had some strokes, so she actually can't communicate or really move. She's like mostly paralyzed. She can only move her left hand, so the only way that they can communicate is through a typewriter. And she decides she's gonna tell the caretaker what happened the night her family died. I loved the setting of this book. It was very atmospheric. I loved like the sort of haunted house but not really vibe. It reminded me of the house from The Haunting of Bly Manor, if you've seen that, and the end was so good. It was like a twist after twist after twist. Next is A Flicker in the Dark. This is about a psychiatrist whose dad is in jail for being a serial killer, and it's now like 20 years later and people start dying the same way they did when it was her father, and it seems like the cases are following her and centering around her, so she decides to figure out what's going on. Has a good unreliable narrator kind of vibe, and the twist at the end surprised me. Next is another very atmospheric thriller, The Guest List. Kind of the same vibe as The Only One Left, in the sense that it's like by the water, it's rainy, it's secluded. I love stuff like that. This takes place on a very remote island in Ireland where the only people on the island are the wedding party and the staff, and someone dies, so you're trying to figure out what's going on. But one thing I really liked about this, if I'm remembering correctly, because it's been a while, you actually don't know who dies until the end. So you're not only trying to find out what happened, but you're also trying to figure out who died. And I thought that was really fun. I thought the ending was good. I loved the setting. Although it was definitely more of a whodunit mystery than like a thriller. The next little category is Dark Academia. And we have to start off strong with one of my favorite books ever, If We Were Villains. This follows 7 students who study at this really prestigious conservatory college where they study drama, but they only do Shakespeare. And while they're studying Shakespearean tragedies, they have a tragedy of their own. One of them does end up going to jail for the crime. It's now 10 years later when he's out of prison, and he decides to tell the detective that was on the case what actually happened. It's past, present, point of view, and it's just so good. It's so immersive. It has like a very sort of moody, like eerie tone through the whole thing. I love the way the author includes Shakespeare, and I'm not even like a big Shakespeare person. Like, I don't read Shakespeare, but just the parallels between those stories and what's going on in their real life and blurring the edges between what's real and what's not is so good. The audiobook is also really good if you like audiobooks, because they perform the Shakespeare in the audiobook, and it's just so good. Could not recommend it enough. Perfect for fall. In My Dreams I Hold a Knife is sort of similar. It has the same like basic plot, just different vibe. This also follows 7 college students where one of them dies, and while her boyfriend, who's also part of the friend group, is believed to have done it, they never actually prove it and to find out what really happened. So it's now 10 years later, they're at their college reunion, and the friend group is trying to figure out what actually went down. Different vibes from If We Were Villains, because this takes place at, I think it's like a southern college, so they have like frats and sororities and that sort of stuff, so the school is definitely a different vibe. But again, past, present, POV. I really enjoyed this. I couldn't put it down. I thought the twist at the end was really good. And one thing specifically I thought Ashley Winsett did really well in this novel is that the main character, while on one hand is like very unlikable and you don't want to root for her, but she's also like very humanized. Like, she feels like a real person, and when she's explaining sort of like her struggles and what she's going on, you can't help but feel for her, which I thought was really well done, especially in a thriller where it's so easy to just have like unlikable characters or people who you don't root for at all. This was a little something different. The next one is the only dystopian on the list, Station 11. This is about society after a flu-like pandemic kills like 90% of the world's population, so definitely proceed with caution if that is going to be triggering to you. It definitely was a little close to COVID for my liking personally, but it's so good. It's set like 25 years after the pandemic, and it follows a traveling symphony who is trying to keep art alive in this post-apocalyptic society. And you also get flashbacks to when the pandemic happened, and this is just so beautifully written. Like, the way she's able to interweave the different characters and timelines and storylines is so good, and it's just one of those books that sits with you forever. Like, I think about this book all the time. I don't want to get too much into it because I went in like pretty blind, and I think it's more fun that way. Next up, I have some young adult recommendations. Sarah Dessen raised me. I swear loving her books is why I love Emily Henry so much. And Just Listen, I feel like, is the perfect book of hers for fall. It's about Annabelle, who goes through something really traumatic and loses her best friend in the process. And it's now fall, the first day of school. So she's navigating like her new life after that happens to her. And she ends up sparking like this friendship and romance with this guy, Owen, who was like her complete opposite, but he sort of breaks her out of her shell again. She's also a model, which I thought was really interesting. It's not something you see a lot, although I will say, like, definitely check the trigger warnings. Her sister has an eating disorder, and that's a pretty big part of the book. Seeing her sister heal from that and how it affects her family, and it's discussed like pretty graphically. Like, just be aware. And what Annabelle goes through is also not great, so check the trigger warnings on this one. If you want sort of a less serious YA contemporary, I recommend Better Than the Movies. This is about Liz, who is like rom-com obsessed, and in order to make her longtime crush jealous, she fake dates her neighbor slash rival nemesis slash childhood friend. And it's just a very cute, sweet YA rom-com. If you want like an easy read, a palate cleanser, something to get you out of a book slump, that's perfect. We also have A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. In Pip's hometown 5 years ago, a girl goes missing and then her boyfriend kills himself, so everybody just assumes that means he's guilty, but she doesn't believe it. So for her senior capstone project, she decides to solve the murder. It was really fun reading a mystery thriller with a YA protagonist, and I thought this was really good. It totally sucked me in. I really wanted to know what happens. I couldn't put it down. And even though it was YA, it still dealt with like some pretty serious things and still kind of felt like a regular thriller, which I appreciated because I was nervous because it was YA, it would be like kind of lame, but it ended up being really good. This is also part of a series. I haven't read the other two in the series, but I've heard those are also really good. Next up, I have two series recommendations from the same author. First is The Inheritance Games. This is about Avery, who comes from nothing. She's like living in her car or with her sister since her mom has passed away, and she finds out that she has inherited the entire estate of Texas's richest man, Tobias Hawthorne, and she has no idea why. The only catch is that she has to live in the Hawthorne's house with his four grandsons for a year before she can inherit the fortune. He was also obsessed with like riddles and secret passages and codes and stuff like that, so throughout the series they're trying to figure out why she's there, why he left her his money, what's going on, and they're sort of solving like all these clues and puzzles while they do it. Really fun, perfect for fall, and just an easy read. Her books are good if you just want to get like lost in a series. She's perfect. She also has the Natural series, which is like YA Criminal Minds, which I've actually never seen, but that's how everybody describes it. And it's about the Naturals program, which is part of the FBI, where they recruit teenagers with special skills to help them solve cold cases. There's 5 of them in this program, and they all have different skills. Cassie, the main character, is a profiler. There's like a human lie detector, someone who's really good with numbers, that sort of thing. And each book has a different case they're trying to solve, and you get backstory on each of the characters, and then there's like an overarching case that they're trying to solve throughout the entire series. Again, just like very easy to read, sucks you in with all the cases, and was really interesting. Next category is fantasy. I'm really not a fantasy girl. I'm trying to be, but the same way I feel like thrillers are good for fall, I feel the same way about fantasy. The first is 6 of Crows. This is a YA fantasy, and it follows 6 different characters while they're trying to pull off this really big heist. And they all like come from different backgrounds and do different things. There's a convict, a sharpshooter, a runaway, a spy, a heartrender, and a thief. And it's so fun seeing them all come together because they like don't match at all. They don't even like each other for most of it. They butt heads, but it's so fun to see them pulling off the heist, and you grow to really love each character, and it's so good. It's also easy to understand, which I appreciate because, like I said, I don't read a lot of fantasy, so I like when it's not like overly complicated because my little romance pea brain can't handle it. Next is the book literally everybody in the world is talking about right now, Fourth Wing. I had to put it in here in case you don't know, which you probably do. This is about a war college for dragon riders. The main character, Violet, has trained her whole life to be a scribe, which is like the smart section. It's very much like Divergent with like the different factions, but her mom is forcing her to become a dragon rider, which is very dangerous. And this is just a lot of fun. It's high stakes. There's like an enemies to lovers plot going on. There's dragons. I mean, who doesn't love dragons? I mean, really. And it's just a good time. I will say, potentially a little bit overhyped. Like this, I don't think quite lived up to just the sheer level of hype that it had, but it's still really fun and I would recommend it. The next and final category are romance books that don't take place in the fall but give fall vibes. First is All Roads Lead Here, which fully takes place in the summer, but to me small town romances just give fall even when it's not. This is about Aurora, and she is recently divorced, so she's starting her life over. She decides to go back to her hometown in Colorado, where she hasn't been in like 15 years since her mom went missing on a hike when she was like 12. So it's about her just completely changing her life, hiking to be closer to her mom, just starting over, finding herself. But she rents a garage apartment from the grumpy single dad, of course, which I just love that trope. I loved him, and the relationship that she develops with his teenage son is really sweet. She's also a musician, and so is the son, so they talk a lot about music and they bond over it, which I really love. And you know, who would I be if I didn't recommend an Emily Henry novel in all of my videos? And to me, beach read is for the fall. Again, like, it's simply not. It's set over the summer. It's literally called beach read, but it's a fall book. If you're watching this video, you probably know what beach read is. Just in case you don't, this is about January, who's an author, and she's going to live in her father's beach house after he has passed away, which she didn't even know existed. She finds out at the funeral that he had actually had an affair, so she's grappling with that, dealing with a lot of things internally. She can't write anymore, and it turns out her next door neighbor is her college rival Gus, who is also sort of going through it. So they decide to swap genres. She's gonna write like general fiction and he's gonna write a romance novel. And it's the perfect rom-com romance book. I could not recommend it enough. Gus and January just have a very special place in my heart. If for some reason you haven't read this yet, do it now. This is about Elsie, who as a side hustle fake dates people, but during the day is an adjunct professor. She's a theoretical physicist and she goes for a job interview at MIT, and it turns out one of the guys on her hiring committee is her fake boyfriend's brother. And I just thought that premise was so fun. She doesn't want to tell him that she's fake dating the brother and like expose him, but he thinks she's just this big liar and she's been lying to his brother about her life. And so they're navigating all of that, also kind of having feelings for each other. And she is like the biggest people pleaser ever. She is the pathological people pleaser, and so seeing her try and like break out of that was really special, and I just loved them. I loved them together. I think it's my favorite Ally Hazelwood. Last but not least, we have a new favorite of mine, The 7-Year Slip. Clementine inherits her late aunt's apartment only to discover that it sometimes slips 7 years in the past. And 7 years before this, her aunt had let her friend's son stay in her apartment for the summer. So she's with this guy, but it's 7 years in the past, and she is wondering like why he never finds her in the future, and just like the dual timelines. I normally don't love magical realism in books, but this I thought was really well done, and it was obviously like not realistic at all. It's time travel, but it still felt very grounded in reality, which I like. And it was just one of those books that feels like it was made for me. Like, it has so many things I love in it, and it's so comforting. Like, this book feels like a cup of tea, like a warm cup of tea, a hug. It's so comforting, and it's just like so intimate and romantic. And while the romance is good, it's also mostly about her journey, which I really liked. I loved reading about her relationship with her aunt, and right now, like, end of September is the perfect time to read this. And that was it. Those are my autumn book recommendations. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to follow me on any of my other socials, they'll be linked down below.